So I started cleaning my tarot shelf and I figured why not take this opportunity to both dust it off and clean it and do a deck collection video while I'm at it. So that's what we are doing today. I store my tarot decks on a tree style shelf. I'll insert a clip here of what it looks like. You can kind of find this shelf anywhere. I believe I got it on Wayfair at the time. I don't really have an organization to the shelf. There might be 3 shelves that have a specific purpose. Otherwise, these are in no particular order and I just arrange them by how they will fit. I have a very small space, so I need to maximize every square inch that I can and make sure my storage is optimal at the same time. So the first tier on my shelf, it contains my classic decks. Some of these might not be defined by you as classic, but they are classic to me. And we're going to start off with the deck that started all of this, and that is the Mystical Shaman Oracle. I adore this deck. It has been in my collection the very longest. I came across Oracle cards through ASMR, specifically Wise Woman Whispers ASMR channel. They no longer upload, but they performed weekly Oracle readings, and I was just blown away by the messages that week after week were coming up for the collective, but that resonated with me. So I dove right in, and after much research, I decided to pick the Mystical Shaman Oracle, and it has been a companion to me ever since. The next deck that I have is the Gil Tarot. I've had the Gil Tarot in my collection for a while now, and it was actually Katie Flowers here on YouTube who no longer uploads tarot content, but instead created a book channel because that's where she felt more aligned. But this was Katie Flowers' deck. She talked about this deck all the time. She featured it in a lot of her videos, and it really became to me what represented her as a creator, as a tarot reader, is the Gil Tarot. I think it's an underrated deck. I really like the artwork. It's very emotive, very detailed. The minors have keywords. I'm not really sure if it is specifically a Thoth deck, but there is some Thoth influence in my opinion here. This is still in print, so you can get a copy, published by US Games. Yeah, we have the Gil Tarot in my classics shelf. The next deck that I have on my classics shelf is the World Spirit Tarot. I first saw this deck featured on Tom Benjamin's channel. The backs are what really captivated me at first, but then when he was showcasing it even more, it felt very worldly, and at the time I really didn't have anything like that in my collection at all. I was still pretty new, but I was drawn to it. The first edition, which is this version here, is no longer in print, and it wasn't at the time that I came across this deck, but I was able to find a copy on Tarot Marketplace that someone was wanting to sell, and it was a very reasonable price. The deck that I received basically was never used, it was just stored, but it's a really stunning deck, and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. It just feels like it belongs on the classics shelf. It's so worldly and has a lot of culture. So that is the World Spirit Tarot. The next deck on this shelf is my JK Tarot, which I recently acquired in November of 2024. It is just a recoloring, and some of the cards have changed. As you can see, the sun here isn't featuring a baby, but the concept is pretty much very much the same. The coloration has changed, and some of the directionality of the characters has changed because this was created by a Japanese artist, and in Japan they read from right to left versus left to right. So changing some of the positions of the characters, I think, aligns with their culture. It's really stunning. I think it has outnudged my next deck here, which is my Centennial, or my favorite RWS. It's just a little bit more approachable, softer on the eyes, in my opinion. I love the colors. I like how it feels 70s coloration, kind of vintagey. It makes me happy to use it. As I just mentioned, I also have the RWS Centennial. This is the borderless edition. After the Mystical Shaman, I bought this deck and the Sasarai Vito in tandem, and those were my 2 first tarot decks ever, and I've had the same RWS deck in my collection ever since. I mainly used it as a reference while learning. However, recently I spoke about how reading a book recently that had to do with Pamela Coleman Smith and the theater, and they used this deck as the example photos, and there were a lot of activities in that book, and I really enjoyed it, and it brought this deck top of mind, and it really ignited my love for the classic RWS once again, and not only once again, but in a new way that I had never connected with it before, and so much so that it made me kind of purchase the JK Tarot because I just wanted another one very much like it, with just a little bit of a different take here and there, but yes. And we end here with the star, beautiful. And the final deck that I have on this shelf for my classics is this little deck of playing cards. I came across this in an antiques store in, I think it was North Carolina, while visiting family several years ago. I haven't particularly studied or used classic like bridge playing cards for divination. It's just a matter of not having time, but when I do, I want to start off with using this deck. I love the size, I love the backs, but I just think they're really nice, and I like seeing them up on my shelf with all the classic decks. The next two shelves, they are decks in boxes, but the boxes are a similar size, so kind of a theme, but not really. The first deck I have here to share in my decks that have similar box sizes is the Sassaribito Tarot. Again, this was in tandem along with my RWS Centennial, my first tarot deck ever. Actually, I could technically, on a technicality, say that it was, because although I ordered both of them at the same time, the Sassaribito came in first physically in the mail. It's a beautiful deck. I haven't used it in quite a while. I've been focused on other decks, but definitely it will have its comeback. It will have its turn. I love this deck too much. You guys all know. So that is Sassaribito. The next one we have is the Fountain Tarot. I had no idea that the Fountain Tarot had like an indie version. I think there's only like one video out there kind of talking about the differences or the comparison, and basically it's pretty much the same, just different publishers or printers, and then obviously one is mass market and the other is not. This deck is still available. It's one of my favorites. It's like a soul connection for me. These cards and images are very evocative, and they bring up a lot of emotion for me every time I reach for it. I was very hesitant at first to get this because everywhere in every review or video featuring this deck talked about how it was quite cold and came off that way, but that's kind of the opposite of how I find this deck. I find it actually very bright and almost like an orange, biting into an orange slice, and that first burst of citrus in your mouth, that's just how this deck feels to me, and it's really special and I adore it so much. Next we have the Uncommon Tarot. This was one of the first collage style decks, maybe if not the first actually, in my collection that I ever got, and kind of set in motion my whole collage obsession that I'm sure many of you can relate to. But this is digitally collaged, and this has a lot of depth to it. I mean, I've had very profound readings with this deck, and I've actually like cried. It's cathartic. I think that is the best word I could ever use to describe this deck, and how it works for me is releases emotion, and it's a cathartic experience, similar to when we've been holding it together and holding it together, and then finally we just let ourselves cry. We don't hold up walls anymore, and we just release. And even though it feels so mountainous and huge at that time, after your last sniffles have dried and your tears are gone, you kind of just sit there in this state of what just happened, and you take stock of how you're feeling. It's like the moment after the storm, that star moment, if you will, that pause before you really start taking action once again. On a lighter note, the next one I have is my tarot bot. So I do have this one, which is my original copy, and I have this unopened copy as a backup because I adore this deck way too much to ever be potentially without it. I just want to give every robot in here a hug. I'm sure you guys are a little sick of me talking about this deck, because every time I pull it out and I talk about it, it's in the same vein of they are emotive and they are quirky and they're cute and there's some humor in here, and it's like the robots are discovering Earth for the first time and everything is brand new to them, and they're discovering everything, and all of that discovery and what it entails is like what this deck feels to me, and it just brings me the utmost joy to use. And as you can see, like, it's very, very well loved, hence why I decided to buy a backup copy, because this isn't the best cardstock in the world. It's quite thin. I feel like the backs are actually glossier. Of course, with overhead filming, it kind of shows the same either way, but I wouldn't necessarily call this high gloss. There is gloss to it, but it's a little bit different than a traditional gloss cardstock, in my opinion. It's very thin and not exactly as durable as I would hope for, but that doesn't stop me from loving and using this deck. So that is my tarot bot. Next is my Happy Halloween Tarot. This is the indie version. I know that there is a mass market version coming out, or it has been released. I can't remember. It's just really cute and it's very well themed for Halloween time and Samhain, and I think like the fun side of Halloween. I really love the backs. I like the combination of the colors and how it spirals outwards and all the little details centered on the holiday. It is a pip style deck, but I think there's enough here to go on. I just couldn't resist. Orange is my favorite color, and orange is a very prominent color in this deck, so I really appreciate that. Next, I have my Chromatic Fates Tarot. This is a deck that was created by different artists. This is a vector style. I feel like this King of Swords comes out every time I need an example of different art styles, but he's very vector-like, and then this one is, you know, not. This is a good one. He's very ornate, but there's something about the colors that just pull this deck together, even though it's made by all different artists. This is one of my favorites in my collection. It's so beautiful. The cardstock is almost like plastic-like. It is very, very, very flexible. I think, over bend the cards index because I have small hands, and with cardstocks and the theme of thicker cardstock and more durable cardstock, I always put a little extra emphasis. But with this one, I did that. You don't have to do that with this deck. It's very flexible. It is thinner, but there's weight to it. I don't know how to describe it. It's just a lovely, lovely deck. The next one is Anima Mundi. I think this is a classic at this point, so maybe I should put it on my classic shelf. I think the Sassurai Vito should be up there too, so maybe I'll shift them up. I guess I would say Fountain Tarot is a pretty classic deck as well nowadays, like a modern classic. I adore animals, and the art in this is just stunning. You can tell that the artist put a lot of intention into this deck. This deck actually helped me to connect to the sword suit more than any other deck. It doesn't feel too scary to me, but it feels nice and broody, moody. It taught me a lot. And the significator that I have for this deck is the Queen of Swords. If you didn't know, I also assign a significator that represents the deck, and that can either come forward as it's a stalker card that keeps coming up, or intuitively it just feels like it is. And I kept pulling the Queen of Swords, and the Queen of Swords in this deck is an owl, and she's staring you right in the eyes, asking you for the truth and to bare your soul and your thoughts. I just thought that that feeling represented this deck very well. Yes, it is a little bit more on the pippish side, but I don't know, something just flows. There she is, Queen of Swords. Yes. She knew I had to say something more about this so she could come forward. But it is a little bit on the pippish side, but as you can see, there's still something there to pull you in, to nod to the RWS a little bit, a little hint. It doesn't leave you completely alone with just nothing to go with. Next, we have the Anthropologist Tarot, which is a newer deck in my collection. Speaking of significators, this card also kept popping up a lot as I used this deck, so this card is the significator for the deck, and I think it's very fitting and appropriate. It's cheeky, it's fun, it's bold, has a lot going on, but I love it so much. I first saw this on Janaki's channel, and I was like, oh dear, I have to have that deck. I have to. The cardstock is, I would say, a satin. It's got slip to it. It has some sheen, but it's not gloss, I would say. It is very flexible cardstock. It is on the thinner side, but I have no problem with that. It's held up perfectly fine. Very unique, unlike anything that I have in my collection, which was outside of or I guess in tandem with the artwork is what drew me to this deck. It's just very cool, very collagey. The artist has a good eye for color and texture and shape. Just a very cool deck to have. I have here Spacious Tarot. Again, I think this could go on my classics shelf in a way. I just think that this deck is very iconic, and it brought forward something different to the table at the time by not featuring any humans, but also by zooming in and making it seem like it's from the perspective of someone standing and what they view and what they see. I thought that was very unique. You can still find this deck available either secondhand by repurchasing or on the creator's website. It's just a really great deck to have, and I use it as my palette cleanser when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I need some space that's not cluttered, that gives me some room. This is what I grab and what I choose to work with. Next is the White Newman Tarot. This is my second repurchase of this deck. I love the bold colors. I repurchased it because I believe it got lost in a move a couple years ago. So earlier this this year I repurchased it. I kicked myself a little bit because I had waited so long and I missed having this deck in my collection. I love the thickness and the gloss to this cardstock. I know some people have a problem with Liminal 11 cardstock, but I like it. I think it enhances the style and the vibrancy of the colors a lot better than other cardstock would. This deck feels like my true Aries self. I am an Aries, but I've described before that I don't necessarily feel fully like an Aries. I feel like a very watery Aries, and I feel like this deck handles both so well, the fire side, the watery emotive side. I just think it comes together very harmoniously, and I feel seen and understood by this deck. And it does come with 2 extra cards, the Black Newman and the White Newman. There is a write-up for each of those in the little teeny tiny guidebook. Moving to the next one, we have Tarot of the Crystal World. This deck is new to my collection in 2024, and it completely blew my socks off. I was not expecting it to. I saw it being sold secondhand, and I had been curious about it since I saw it on Kickstarter, but because I had the White Newman, I thought maybe that the art styles would be too similar, and I would end up having 2 decks that are very much the same, but they are actually quite different. There's a different feeling. I couldn't put this deck down, as many of you know. Towards the second half of the year, it's when I acquired this deck and had been in wrap up after wrap up as a deck that I used in that current month. It's the only deck that I have tried the bonding experience where you put it under your pillow, and I really enjoyed that. I had some really lovely dreams and I felt at peace while sleeping. I don't know how to describe that. Kind of sounds a little funny, but I just got some very nice restful sleep that felt slow, not like the you fall asleep and when you wake up you feel like you're only asleep like 2 minutes and it's already morning. No, this was very intentional and slow and restful sleep. So that is Tarot of the Crystal World. Next I have the Fantasy Garden Tarot, which is a completely underrated deck, I think, in general. This takes its time. It's very supportive. It's a great little deck. It's smaller than standard tarot size, but it's really been super impactful when I've used it. I've really walked away with better understanding of what the tarot is trying to communicate with me, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we walk away with even more questions than our original one, but this one really guides me and pushes me in a certain direction where then I can sit at least in that category or bubble or theme and ponder, as opposed to more blanket thinking, I guess. This art was all done with ballpoint pen, like every single detail ballpoint pen, and I believe the artists also wanted to challenge themselves even more, and they only used 8 colors. So any like complex color schemes that you see is all blending different, just 8 different ballpoint pen colors to get that depth, which is really, really cool and very fascinating and wonderful. Next I have an oldie but a goodie. That's Santa Muerte. This is a stunning deck. I love Fabio Listrani's Vantage Point, and it's like old or early 2000s computer artwork. I don't know, it just has that look and feel to it. So it kind of feels nostalgic, like it's digital, but it's almost in the best way possible, of course. It's kind of flat looking, which is what early digital artwork kind of looked like and felt like. So I really appreciate that layer to it. This deck always has me wondering, it always has me guessing, like, what could it possibly mean? I could pull this Page of Cups 8 times in a row and literally get different message each and every time. It's got its own personality. It's quirky, it's daring in a way. It's like asking you to light that match and what you use it for, whether to light a candle or to set something else on fire that might be more destructive. It's kind of up to you. Okay, we're down to our last 2 that round out this, I guess, category. The next one is my Earth Magic Oracle cards. This is a beautiful deck that pairs well with everything. I adore it so much. I'm just very connected to this deck. I've had very profound readings with it, and it is very intuitive for me. I think the main keyword and then this accompanying keyword here really does a great job of giving you enough to go by your intuition, but as I've stated before, see, this was made, I feel like, in the early 2000s-ish or early 2010s, and it has that same like flatness and style that the Santa Muerte has. Anyway, that's like the one outlier card though. All of them are usually like very beautiful scenes. It's just a lovely deck, intuitive, but if you want to and you really want to get the full depth of this deck, you read the guidebook. because it is amazing. And yes, they are a little bit of a long, like a few long paragraphs, but I tell you, like, it just blows me away. There's something in that guidebook that I attach to or I focus on that I didn't maybe pick up before, and it's really beautiful, and I'm really happy to have this. You can still find this in print. It's just a lovely oracle deck. And finally, in this category, our last one is Goblins and Gardens Tarot. What a beautiful quirky deck. I love the use of the vintage garden imagery. It's collage, and very crisp and neat collage, mind you. Collage has a tactic called fussy cutting, and it's literally called fussy cutting because you kind of fuss over the small little intricate details and cutting out every little nook and cranny, and it just elevates the crispness of the collage, in my opinion. The artist did a really good job with cutting everything out, arranging it. It's very quirky. It's telling its own story. I love the juxtaposition between the characters who are in black and white and the everything else that's in full color. I just think it's a beautiful balance, because either the black and white figure can draw you to it, your eye to it right away, or maybe it's so stark and so contrasted that your eye maybe focuses more on this cactus or what have you. It's a really fun deck. Okay, so the next two shelves are mostly decks that are large or are in oversized packaging, with the exception of two, because I didn't have anywhere else for them, and they're kind of more my smaller decks, so I don't know. I think I'm trying to make sense of why I made these decisions, but I think it only makes sense to me, and now that I'm saying it out loud, it's kind of goofy. But the first deck is Zeke's Arcana. Such a beautiful deck, and seeing it out now, I haven't used it in a while, but now I'm like, ooh, I need to use this for sure, and I don't even care that we're in the middle of winter. I want to use this deck. It makes me feel happy. Obviously, we love the bold colors. We love that they're different alien figures, or you know, we're not quite sure. Are these aliens? Are they humans? What world do they live in? Very different perspective. I do believe that this deck is now out of print. I think when I heard that it was going out of print, this deck had been on my wish list for so long, and I was like, I can't, I gotta get it. It's going to the top. Ah, so beautiful. Look at this Queen of Swords. Stunning. I really used this deck when I first got it. It was closer to the summer. Obviously, I think that's a very matchy season to use it in. Ooh, this High Priestess. Definitely one of my faves. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave this deck out so I can use it. And of course, the amazing Yielding, this hot pink. Next is the Arcana Folia, which I have featured more recently because it is a more recent acquisition. This is a Kickstarter. I'm not sure if there are copies still available, but I loved it is kind of sort of like a limited color palette. Lots of greens and browns and like a white cream color with some flora and fauna here and there for extra pops of color. I've had some really wonderful insights and readings with this deck where it has attributed to a reading and really hit it on the nose. It pairs well with a lot of things. It's just been a really great companion to have. The other smaller deck that kind of got stuck in my oversized packaging categories here is my Spirit Cats Oracle. I really am enjoying this deck. This is also a newer acquisition to this year. I kind of fell into the seeing everyone using, there's a Spirit Cats and is there Witchy Cats? I think there's something else, but it's the same style where there's a cat, beautiful illustration. I don't know, is it watercolor? I think it might be. And then there is the name of the cat and a little bit about it, and then a keyword that this paragraph probably is mostly about. You might think it's silly because it's just another cat deck, but this is a very accurate little reader, and it is very intuitive, and it's so synchronous to any reading I have. And sometimes what I do is pull all my cards, my tarot cards, I leave them face down, and then I'll pull an additional one of these cards just to add to the reading, and I actually set it down to the side and I read it last, and it always is so accurate. It ties right into the reading without me even knowing what the tarot cards were yet. So a great little companion deck to have as well. Next, I have the Mystic Path Oracle. Again, this is a deck that I recently acquired this year. I couldn't commit to a Danielle Noel deck. I had a hard time choosing between which version I liked because I liked cards from each, and I was like, if I were to do this, I would buy both and combine them and make them into the ultimate deck that I wanted, and I just didn't have the resources to do that at the time. So instead I kind of went down a rabbit hole of like similar art styles and similar feelings. And while this does deviate a lot from an image like this, which is very like layered collage and ethereal looking and astral looking, you know, with this elephant here, this is a little bit more of a grounded image. I felt like it hit the mark a little bit better, and it's a good way to dip your toe into a new art style. I think, at least it was for me. I kind of am, I don't know, getting used to this style of art, and the messages are really wonderful as well. For this specific deck, this is all you get. There is no guidebook. There's a little teeny tiny pamphlet, fold out pamphlet, that kind of just tells you to trust your intuition. But we have the larger keyword here, and we have one little phrase and like another one, or just a couple of little accompanying things to go along with the main message. But I find it to be very intuitive. I really find that this is all you really need. Even if the keyword is a little bit different, it does feature a couple that, you know, you might not always see all the time, which is nice. The last deck on this first oversized shelf is the Death Doula. We all know it's hard to put into words, this deck. It is a masterful piece of art. It is truly brilliant. And I think often we talk a lot about trailblazers in the industry as far as tarot, but we don't speak, I mean, I haven't heard anyone at all speak about trailblazers in the industry in the oracle category. And I would definitely put Death Doula in that category of an oracle deck that has just led the way to a new perspective, a new theme, to really push your limits and explore something even as serious as, you know, what a Death Doula represents. It is one of the most, if not the most stunning deck that I own. I've had this a couple years now, so it is not new to this year, but I believe you can still find this and purchase it. The cardstock is this wonderful, super matte cardstock. The subtle foiling embellishments as the border on the front and back with just the dot, I think is brilliant, because on the face of the card is like a photo collage with experimenting with different exposure, so exposing the film, and it kind of creates a flaw, I guess, in a way, but you can use that flaw as art, and that's what this artist has done. But because the fronts tend to be, in general, a little bit busier sometimes, I think having such a plain back is, I don't know, it was a great choice in my opinion. I know that there are some people that really dislike these backs, but I think it works beautifully. Okay, so I'm actually feeling quite tired right now. We have 1, 2, 3 more shelves to go. I'll finish up this video tomorrow. Okay, so some time has passed, and let's move on to the next oversized deck and deck packaging shelf. The first one I have here is the Serpent and the Peacock. I've had this for a couple years now. This is the, I think it's like the artist's collection, or the artist's version, the tarot art version, that's right. I love this deck a lot. I like reading with it. It has been quite some time since I have pulled this out, and I'm not sure why, but it's a good one. It features medieval art, which is very quirky and classical yet different. I like how all the cards in a spread look. I think the choices were very well done. This has a slightly rose petal feel to it, but it's not the super thick kind where it's not movable. This has some slip to it, and it is a thinner cardstock, but very bendy and flexible, which is nice. And then by the same creator, Libra Moon Ink, I have Medieval Beast Oracle, which is a chunky guy. There's like 90 something cards in here. Again, it features medieval artwork, but it's all animals. There are some more fantastical animals in here, and then there are animals that are realistic in our everyday lives. I haven't worked too much with this as it's newer to my collection this year. This was a Kickstarter. I think the backs are really gorgeous. I love this deep red with these, it's almost like an ochre kind of yellow tone. I don't know, I'm just finding myself really drawn to red at this stage of my life. So I think those are very wonderful backs. The next deck on this shelf is my Majestic Earth Tarot. I acquired this year. I found a beautiful seller who, she was just so wonderful to work with. She was selling this at a decent price, and we just made a really good connection, and I really appreciated buying it from her. I knew that she had liked it and taken care of it and wanted to find someone who would equally appreciate it. This is a deck that I am doing a deep dive study of for 2025. I am currently thinking about jotting down ideas on how to plan it. There will be a video on those plans and how I'm organizing it in a few future videos, so be on the lookout for that. I'm going to try and structure all of my deep dives pretty similarly, maybe making a couple tweaks here and there, but if I can find a good formula for it, then I will be doing this more often with my decks. This will be my first, I guess, official time doing my own concerted deep dive with a deck. I have studied my decks before, and I've, done some deep studying with them, but not anything that had a lot of organization to it. So this will be my first try. These packs are so beautiful. And the last deck on this shelf is my Daydreaming NC2. I really adore this deck. I love the style of the artwork and the collage. I don't really see this type of collage, and I think some people might find or say that it's messy, but I think I don't know, I just think there's a creative quality to it. Having to search for all these different pieces and textures to make a scene, it's not easy work, and I've had this maybe 2 or 3 years now. I got it pretty soon after it was released or came out. It's a very calming deck to use. It gives me a lot to think about, and I really sink into the imagery with this deck. Okay, so the next shelf I have is actually my most tedious shelf, and that's because it houses all my tuck boxes. I think outside of my classic shelf, which features a couple of tuck boxes, the rest of them are on this shelf. And the first one that I have is the Vedi Tarot. And this could have gone on my oversized shelf, but there was like no more room, and it actually fit better on my tuck box shelf because it comes in a tuck box. So that's where it lives. I got this in this year. I saw it on a Trio of Witches channel, and I couldn't let it go from my mind. The images are super stunning. It's on oversized cardstock, so let's compare. So very oversized. I love the artwork. I've had a really nice time getting to know this deck and using it. It is a very fine linen cardstock, so it is flexible even though it is larger in size, which I find helpful for shuffling. It's just very beautiful. The next tuck box deck that I have is Taroki by Mr. Freiborg. This is the undistressed, just there's no distressing or aging. That's the version that I have, and this is the second deck that I will be doing a deep dive study of in 2025 after I complete my study with Majestic Earth. I'm going to be using this deck, and it'll be interesting because I haven't or am not as familiar with Marseille, and this is more in that style. So alongside studying this deck, I will also be diving into Marseille, so that will be really fun, and I'm really looking forward to that. I love the art style. I know that this artist just came out, is it Tarot Siren or something like that, which is a mermaid theme, and they are these skeletal, I don't even know, they have skeleton faces, but their bodies are have flesh. So, but the figures are in that same style. It's very beautiful. I love the color and the saturation in this deck, and I'm sorry that all of these are mismatched. Usually I don't personally shuffle reversals. I allow the energy of the card and the position of the card as I'm drawing them to come out and kind of let me know if they're reversals. Next I have the Nebo Tarot, which I also got this year. This is still in print. You can find it on US Game Systems, but I wanted a vintage copy, I guess. I don't know why. I'm just that kind of person. I like the character that antique vintage things bring forward, but it's absolutely beautiful, and the minors do have keywords on them. I haven't worked with this too much. I kind of got it in, I flipped through it a few times, and I've maybe done a couple of daily draws with it. I really love these backs. I don't know what it is, but it just evokes childhood to me, like the Rugrats ball. I don't know. That is the Nebo Tarot. Next I have Desert Illuminations. This is the first edition. It is coming out mass market, so everybody who has been wanting this deck but not wanting to pay hundreds of dollars, it is coming. I think a couple of the images have been changed. I do believe Lindsay has stated that, but it's really stunning, and I feel very grateful and fortunate to have a copy. I love the colors. I love the theme and the style of the art. This is a unicorn deck for me, and I was so flabbergasted. Like, I couldn't even tell you how grateful I was to have this come into my collection, and I appreciate it so much. I will be purchasing the mass market when it comes out from US Game Systems. I believe it's early 2025. I think it's in January actually, and I will be doing that because it comes with the codex, and the codex I think was released in between the first and the second indie edition, perhaps, or maybe alongside the second edition of this deck, and it's out of print as well, and it's hard to come by a copy in general, or if you see Desert Illuminations, the deck, come up for sale, it likely doesn't ever have the codex to it, and I'm just curious curious to know what Lindsay D. Williams has to say about her art and the theme and the card meanings. I just like that extra perspective. So I will be purchasing the mass market version just to have that codex. And also it'll be nice to do a side-by-side comparison. So if you guys are interested in that, please let me know. I'd be happy to do that. Next, I have Tarot del Fuego. And I love decks that have something different to say. I like when they have diverse perspectives and art. This one is so unique. I love the size of Fournier decks. The art is, it just pulls me right in. It's so beautiful. There's an air of mystery to it because I know the artist has discussed not ever releasing any further in-depth reasons for the choices that were made for the art, which I kind of love. I love vague, ambiguous things sometimes, so that kind of piqued my interest even more. Yeah, it's just really different and fun, but I could see it being pretty sassy too. Next, I have the Nosotros Tarot, which I acquired this year, which I'm hearing myself say that over and over, so I guess I acquired quite a few decks this year. I moved about maybe 2 years ago at this point. When I did that move, I culled a lot of my decks that I had previously for a long time, and I don't know, I think now that I've settled some roots here, just felt like there were a couple areas in my practice that I was missing. I'm not quite sure if this is completely out of print. It is a deck. The creators are from Brazil, so this one was kind of hard to find. This has really become such an important deck in my life. It is a feminine themed or positioned deck, so all the figures in here are female presenting. It just is such an accurate reader for me. I love the collage style of it and the colors. Next, I have my Black Lily Tarot. This is a very important deck in my practice. I adore the size. I like the deeper color that this has. I think all of the backgrounds are black, and it makes the pop of color in them stand out even more. This is a very deeply connected type of deck for me. I believe I have spoken about this a little bit before, but when I am feeling very outside of my body or disconnected from my body or even angry at my body, I reach for this deck because it kindly tells me to quit being mean to myself. And it reminds me that our flaws are what make us beautiful and unique. The figures in here they're just different, and I don't know, it just makes me feel more connected in a more positive way to my body. It's a really beautiful deck, and it has impacted my life for the better in an insurmountable way. So I would never, ever, ever get rid of this deck. Next, I have the Home Oracle, which, as you could see, was in my top 3 oracles of 2024. If you missed that video, I'll put a card up. I won't tell you where it ranked, but this oracle is so special. I came across it a couple years ago on Etsy, and the artwork drew me in immediately. There's lots of blues and yellows, and I just feel that blue and yellow is a lovely combination of colors that my eye is drawn to. I love the style of the art, and the guidebook is beautiful, and I am so thankful that it came my way. It hits me in the feels all the time, but I can't thank it enough for doing just that because I have some profound readings with this deck. Next, we have Tarot de Carlotides, another Fournier deck. This, I finally jumped onto the bandwagon this year and decided to check it out. I just wanted to see how it would work for me, and so I found a secondhand copy, and that's a tip I guess that I have. If you're curious about a deck or how it may work and you're still a little bit unsure, try to find one secondhand on any of the marketplaces, or Etsy sometimes has some people that sell secondhand, eBay, Mercari. It's a great way to acquire a deck in a financially more responsible way, especially if you don't know if you're going to connect with it. You just want to kind of find out. The readings I've done with this have been really awesome so far. I haven't used it a ton, but it's been great. I find that I don't really need the guidebook for this. It feels very intuitive for me. It is pretty quirky, but I love that. I almost wish that this Fournier deck was a little bit larger in size because I love the images so much. I just want a bigger version of it. Next here, I have the Small Spells Tarot. This is the colored version. I think there is a black and white version, and I had been looking for a deck that featured a little bit more of a minimalist style. I think as you can tell so far, I choose decks that have a lot of art jam-packed into them, so I wanted to see if one that had a little bit more white space would help me slow down and think about the arrangement of the items. I mean, I feel like with so much white space, there's a lot of intention into what is featured or what is depicted on each card. I have not used it a lot since I got it, but I know that there will be a time and a place and a purpose for when it comes forward. I follow my moods, so whatever I'm drawn to day by day, I just pick up and read with. The next one is Crystal Visions. I don't use this deck a whole lot, but there's something to the artwork that brings me back to childhood. I don't know if this was colored pencils or oil, those like oil pastel crayon thingies. Wow, so sorry, but it just feels, I don't know, there's a quality to it that brings out or brings forward an inner child lens. So I want to explore that a little bit more with this deck when I have a little bit more time to really sink into that. The author was inspired by, yes, the song Stevie Nicks, so that's a nice little touch too. Sometimes it can feel a little on the corny side, but then we have cards like this where you just feel all the things, so there is depth to it. And the final deck that I have in the tuck box category on my shelf is Tarot of the Animal Lords. This is mass market, however, it's out of print mass market. I liked the style that the animals were drawn in. It just feels different from the other animal decks that I have had or that I do have. I adore these backs. I like the coloration. And I've told this story a few times because I have featured it here and there, but there is a rhino in this deck, and rhinos are really precious to me. And the rhino card wasn't in a position that I felt that it normally is. I feel like a lot of people choose to put it in a more negative, I guess, card to try and evoke that power and sturdiness. In this deck, the choice felt really right. And in general, rhinos really aren't featured in animal decks a whole lot, so I had to have it. One that I haven't worked too much with, but I'm excited to dig in when the time comes. Okay, so we finally made it to the final shelf, and this shelf contains all of my decks that are in bags. So the first one here is the Oracle of the Crystal World, and this comes with the Tarot of the Crystal World. It's lumped in there, but I thought I would give it its own little bag. I've used this a handful of times alongside the Tarot of the Crystal World. I've also used it alone, but mostly I like to use it with the tarot because obviously it's a cohesive match. It's just a fun little oracle. The next deck I have is in a Peggy bag, and it is Stella's Tarot. And this is an out-of-print deck, but it's so beautiful. I love the dainty quality to the art. It's a little bit odd. I like something that's a little offbeat. This deck feels like my true inner self. It's a little bit shy, it's introverted, it's pretty quiet. It likes alone time, so I don't really pair this with others. I actually like the borders of this. I don't know, I think it frames it well. It is a smaller cardstock size. It's about the same width, but it's quite a bit shorter than standard tarot, which is nice for those of us with smaller hands or have trouble with mobility. I've had this deck quite a while, and it's a really great reader. It's very calm, cool, collected, quiet, introspective. Next, I have the Morgan Greer, and I actually have two copies of the Morgan Greer. One of them stays out on my desk at all times. That's this one. This one here on the right is what you would buy today if you went to US Games. This is a vintage copy. I can't remember the year, but it is a blue box. It was never opened. I actually bought it still factory sealed. I think it was in the 1979 version, and I love the Morgan Greer so much. This, until recently when I opened it, had never seen the light of day, and I keep it out on my desk because it's so beautiful, and I want to honor the deck and actually use it. So if anytime I'm traveling or need to bring a deck with me, I will take my mass market copy of the Morgan Greer. It's pretty easy to read for me. It's a classic, so if I were to put it on my shelf and in its box, I would have it on the first shelf. But because I store this one in a bag, it goes with that group. The cardstock on this is much thinner, but it's quite bouncy. I'm not afraid to riffle shuffle it, but I'm not rough with it. It's hard to tell with, there's no natural light right now. It's dark outside, but there are color differences between this cardstock, which is more like a satin, and this, which is what I would call a true matte. but you all have seen Morgan Greer 1,000 times over. Next, I have this one, which is the Wilderness Collide Oracle. This is newer to my collection this year. I've spoken about it a few times. It's a digitally collaged deck, and it has a printout like pamphlet as a guidebook. I just thought that this deck was so unique, and of course when I came across it and I saw it, of course it would be out of print. I seem to have that luck, I guess you would call it, but I was able to find a copy, and I kind of sat on it for a while because it was pricier, but I waited and the seller dropped the price a couple times, and then there was a sale on their shop, so I ended up snagging it because I knew it would probably go and I wanted the chance to work with it. It complements a lot of my decks. It's very Danielle Noelish at times with like this style of card. I don't know, it's just a lovely deck, and I really adore the backs. It like reminds me almost of like quilt work. The next deck I have is my Northern Animal. I have trimmed and edged mine in this it's like copper and sunlight, but when you catch it in a specific light, it kind of has a glimmer of silver. This is just a very adorable deck. It's very well loved in this community. This size here was just a little bit too big for me to riffle shuffle, so there wasn't any borders on this, but there was a lot of space up at the top and at the bottom, so I tried to trim them. I left the sides alone, and then I corner rounded and edged. And sometimes it's hard to edge linen decks because the color will just soak right into the lines of the linen, but I don't know, I felt like, because you can kind of see where I went over a little bit here on the edge. I don't know, I just think it adds something to the deck, and I know it's mine. All around, really well read deck. Does a great job in any type of reading. Beautiful artwork. I love the animals and their cute little faces and just the normal everyday things that they're doing. And the final deck that I have here in a bag, well, it's in a bag, but it's also in a box. But it's a very weird box. It's Estrella's Dream Tarot. It's one of those envelope tuck boxes, which I actually think is easier to use than a regular tuck box because it completely unfolds. And I know some might think that that's even more finicky, but it's actually easier to get back in the box than tuck boxes, like traditional tuck boxes are sometimes. But I acquired this deck this year, closer to summer, and it's been a very deep, very profound, eye-opening deck. I recently did a post about the King of Swords, and he came up in a reading for me, and I wrote a whole Instagram post about it. Follow me on Instagram if you would like. It's simplyhan_tarot. I'll leave it in the description. It's always in the description, so follow me there because in between my YouTube videos you can kind of see what I'm up to. It's been wonderful to use. Again, this is one I came across and then realized it was out of print, and so there's not a lot about this out there, and it was kind of hard to track down, but I did find a copy. I love the colors, and it's this fantastical, dreamlike realm, astral plane, I guess, in a way, kind of psychedelic feeling, and it's very different, as you can see, from anything else in my collection. It is a very slight rose petal, but I have no problem shuffling it. I just adore the readings that have come forward from using this deck. And I do have one last deck that I don't store currently on my shelf, and one is because it is probably the largest box that I own, and two is it's because it's my Oracle deck of the year, so I keep it out and handy right next to my desk over here at all times. And that is the Love Oracle of Eden cards. Huge box, and it comes in this velvet green pouch, which is a lovely touch. It opens like this. Very beautiful. It does have an extra card that talks about symbols that are included on this box, which is, I think, really great. I love that they included that. I have the little guidebook here that I keep out so I don't have to open the box every time. But currently my cards for December are Empathy and Empower, and I keep these out up on my desk just so they're present at all times. But this is a photographic deck, and it's really, really beautiful. This matte, like maroon edge, so stunning. This is rose petal finish, but the front is laminated. Some gold foiling here, just stunning. I have nothing like this, and I think that it's a very inclusive, very diverse deck. The guidebook has really great messages. It's been a really wonderful deck to work with this year as I pulled a card for each month, and I would journal about it. I would look up the definition, like the dictionary definition of this keyword. I would read about it, meditate on it, do a spread at times, do journal prompts that I thought of. So I was really intentional with using this deck. But before it was my Oracle deck of the year, I did use it alongside many of my readings. It's a very powerful, wonderful deck, and I've really enjoyed working with it in the capacity that I have. It's made our bond stronger. I feel like I really get and understand this deck, and I'm really happy that this was my Oracle deck of the year for 2024. And that's it, you guys. That's my entire tarot and oracle collection. I think I have, including duplicates, which I only have 2, which is the Morgan Greer I have 2 of, and my tarot bot I have 2 of. I have 50 decks altogether. I didn't even realize it was that many, but I don't really consider my collection to be that big. At least it doesn't feel big. I'm looking at my shelf right now beside me, and I'm like, how do 50 decks fit on that? It seems like it does a good job holding a lot of decks. But thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment below on any of the decks you saw today. Which ones were your favorite? Which ones are you interested in seeing more? Let me know. I'm so curious. And until next time, see you around.